A secure communications center in the basement of the West Wing. Vice President Dick Cheney is there, along with National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice. Meanwhile, the president leaves Florida, his destination at takeoff a secret. We later learn he's landed at Louisiana's Barksdale Air Force Base. There, he pledges, the U.S. will retaliate.
Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts.
The president then flies to the Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha, Nebraska, the U.S. Strategic Air Command Center. We're in a bunker there. He convenes a national security meeting, joining his team live by teleconference. Back in Washington, his top advisor, Karen Hughes, insists the White House has the situation under control.
Your federal government continues to function effectively. We have a federal emergency response plan, and at President Bush's direction, we are implementing it.
By telephone, the president calls New York Mayor Giuliani and New York Governor Pataki. He also speaks with First Lady Laura Bush. The First Lady and Bush's two daughters are also rushed to secure secret locations. Mrs. Bush, on Capitol Hill when the attacks began, tries to offer words of reassurance.
Well, parents need to reassure their children everywhere in our country that they're safe.
We have just learned that Air Force One has safely landed at Andrews Air Force Base just outside of Washington. From our vantage point, we can see sharpshooters on the roof of the White House tonight, Secret Service patrolling the grounds, police cars driving up and down Pennsylvania Avenue, the White House in a lockdown as we wait to hear what the president has to say to the nation. Tom?
Thanks very much, NBC's Campbell Brown. And there are so many questions, but a major question tonight. How could they hijack 4 civilian jetliners in such a precise fashion? How do they pull all that off? Our aviation expert is NBC's Robert Hager, and he's standing by now in Washington as well. Robert?
Tom, 4 airliners turned into deadly weapons. There's a nationwide hold now on all commercial flights. That's the first time that's ever happened in our nation's history. And it lasts at least until midday tomorrow and might last longer than that. And there are also some chilling first details of what may have been going on in those cockpits. But first, the facts.
The string of events that results in these 4 horrific crashes begins at Boston's Logan Airport, 7:45 a.m. American Flight 11, 767, with 92 on board. Supposed to fly Boston to Los Angeles, but over New York State, it's diverted, forced to fly south, directly into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. A long day of carnage is underway. Back in Boston, United Flight 175, another 767, with 65 aboard, is already in the air, also bound for Los Angeles, 15 minutes behind the first flight, when it too is hijacked. This, the actual plane, as it hits the South Tower of the World Trade Center. 8:10 a.m., American Flight 77, a 757 with 64 aboard, has taken off from Washington's Dulles Airport, also bound for Los Angeles. It, too, taken over and loops back into the Pentagon. It slices in at an angle, leaving a deadly and ugly gash in the nation's military nerve center. And finally, 8 a.m. out of Newark Airport, United's Flight 93, a 757 with 45 aboard, bound Newark to San Francisco, hijacked as well, but crashes short of whatever its intended target is, comes down in rural western Pennsylvania. Eyewitnesses there.
And I heard a loud noise, and I happened to look up, and it was a plane. It was real low to me. It sounded like it was running fine to me. I just kept watching. I watched it go nosedive straight into the ground.
You could see where the plane made the initial impact in the ground, and it was still on fire. It made a crater probably 30 feet by 30 feet, and it's probably 15 or 20 feet deep, and there's just debris scattered within probably a half-a-mile radius.
There are only 2 ways terrorists can sneak themselves or their weapons aboard planes, either through passenger screening or by going unscreened through locked doors into off-limits areas or onto the tarmac. Periodic FAA tests have found plenty of flaws. Found when government agents tried to sneak into secure areas, they were successful more than 2/3 of the time. Found testers also often able to sneak fake guns and explosives by X-ray screening. Once aboard, many speculate the hijackers must have disabled crews and taken over the plane's controls. More likely that than forcing a pilot with a gun at his head to fly right into the World Trade Center, for instance. Former American Airlines pilot Jim Tillman.
It is inconceivable to me that any airline pilot would allow anyone to force him to fly into an inhabited building. I cannot imagine how any pilot could be conscious or capable of doing anything to control that airplane at the time that it was directed at one of these buildings.
Terrorism specialist Neil Livingstone.
I suspect that what we're going to find is that the pilots were overwhelmed, perhaps dead already, and that trained pilots from the hijacker camp were in charge of those aircraft and were willing to die for their beliefs.
If there was time, the crews may have been able to press a button in the cockpit and send out a coded warning to controllers that there was a hijack in progress. Controllers may then have radioed back inquiries. But if the crews were disabled, the controllers would have been left in the dark for real information. Whatever else, controllers must have been surprised, in disbelief. There hadn't been a commercial plane hijacked in the U.S. for 10 years, since 1991. And now this.
There are several unconfirmed reports around that give little glimmers of what may have been going on in the cockpits. There's one from a controller in New Hampshire who says that a microphone was left on in the first plane of the day that was hijacked, that the pilot had his microphone keyed so it was picking up the what was going on in the cockpit, and that the controller then, off at the control center in New Hampshire, heard a terrorist say in English, "Don't do anything foolish." Then after that, the microphone went dead. The transponder of the plane went off. That's a device that radios information out to the radar, so controllers could only watch the blip. They could no longer tell what altitude the plane was at. There were several cell phone calls from relatives on board planes who reached their relative on the ground. One reported the terrorists had knife-like instruments, and there was one unconfirmed report that an American Airlines flight attendant actually reached her company to say that terrorists had killed the crew of her plane. Whatever else, we may know some more from the cockpit voice recorders, which could have survived those crashes and would give us an actual recording of what was going on for audio in the cockpits. Tom?
Thanks very much, NBC's Robert Hager at the Pentagon right now. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Henry Shelton. Let's hear what he has to say.
Our intense focus on recovery and helping the injured and the families of those who were killed is matched only by our determination to prevent more attacks and matched only by our unity to track down, root out, and relentlessly pursue terrorists, states that support them, and harbor them. They are the common enemy of the civilized world. Our institutions are strong, and our unity is palpable.
Senator John Warner.
Thank you. As a past chairman,
that is
preceding Carl Levin,
General Shelton, who is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, talking about the institution strong and our unity is strong as war. We are on a war footing, in effect, in this country, even though there has been no official declaration of any kind. But from a military point of view, political point of view, and certainly from a psychological point of view, we are at war with these terrorists. The question is, who are they? Within the intelligence community, all the fingers are pointing at Osama bin Laden, the very wealthy Saudi dissident who has been harbored by the Taliban, it's widely believed, in Afghanistan. Let's get more tonight on the continuing speculation about who is responsible from NBC's Andrea Mitchell now at her post in the nation's capital. Andrea?
Tom, tonight U.S. intelligence officials are mobilizing worldwide to try to find the culprits and make sure that they don't strike again. An attack on America coordinated with military precision. 4 planes, split-second timing, penetration of airports and airspace, no warning.
They can destroy buildings, they can kill people, and we will be saddened by this tragedy, but they will never